Welcome to the Practice Podcast, a show created by lawyers to help lawyers in life and business without all the complicated lawyer language. Let's welcome Bast Amron founders and your hosts, Jeff Bast and Brett Amron.
Brett, hi, how are you?
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm trying to think of a different adjective.
He is outstanding.
Thank you.
Splendid.
I'm outstanding in my field.
Maybe even splendid.
It's a Monday when we're recording this.
We're doing it to prepare for the upcoming summer when both potential guests take time, we take time with our families and away. And so we wanted to highlight a few episodes in our last 4+ years of putting out this podcast and 150 episodes. And one of those episodes is episode number 77, recorded in September of 2022 with one of your former partners, Juan Enjamio.
Juan Enjamio, excellent. Just a all-around great guy and a great lawyer. I worked with him at 2 different law firms. Mm-hmm. And actually, he led the team after my brother's company. He started a company and then got sued by his former employer for violating non-competes. And Juan led the team defending that case, which ultimately resulted in a settlement, and then they sold the business. It was, just a huge success story. But Juan is one of those litigators who is appropriately aggressive, but also super practical and thoughtful. And he's also one of those guys he's like one of those office mentors that everybody goes to for advice. Just a great guy. It was such a pleasure to listen to this episode again because he's just a pleasure to listen to. He just is. And you too, both of the two of you. Listening to the two of you chat was just great. No, but we talked a lot about, the legal landscape in South Florida. Mm-hmm. But I think it's, that conversation is not really limited to, what's happening in Miami. It's happening in a lot of places as firms expand their footprints, and then small firms compete with big firms, and big firms start, growing and opening offices. And Hunton, he's now the managing partner of that office. Hunton's Miami office is a success story in terms of satellite offices. A lot of firms open an office in a remote location, and it just doesn't work. They never really integrate with the community. And Hunton they did it, and they were able to do it almost immediately. They opened a Miami office. They had never had any offices in Florida at all, and almost immediately were recognized as, community leaders.
Well, no doubt, because you were a part of that.
I might have been the linchpin to that.
Might have.
Yeah. Well, they came, I remember when they announced that they were leaving. Mm-hmm. I was at another excellent firm, Holland & Knight, and when you hear 5, major partners are leaving, it's kind of a big deal. And I remember thinking, oh my God, can we survive? And of course we did. But they really opened that office with a splash, and they were, encouraging us to come over almost immediately. It took a couple of years before we finally did. But great guy, great firm, great episode. I think people will enjoy this.
I agree. Enjoy it. I don't think, even if it's 2 years ago, I think that the information that he shares is still relevant, still topical, and I think it's a great conversation. And he's, like you said, he's just a great, great guy. Enjoy.
Hey, Jeff. Hi, Brett. How are you?
I'm all right.
Great. I'm fantastic. I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, which is Juan Enjamio. Juan is the managing partner of Hunton Andrews Kurth's Miami office. He's a commercial litigator who focuses on the defense of companies facing complex employment disputes. He regularly represents clients in discrimination and harassment lawsuits, wage and hour, ERISA litigation, enforcement of non-competes, and he also has extensive experience in international litigation and class action defense. He's a contributing author to the Hunton Employment and Labor Perspectives blog. He's a former adjunct professor of constitutional law at FIU, Florida International University. And he's also one of the most knowledgeable people I know on anything related to University of Florida football. And that's really the reason why you and I wanted to have him here. But welcome, Juan.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to be here.
We'll see if we have enough time to get to Gator football. But for now, why don't you tell us just a little bit about your background, where you grew up, how'd you end up being a lawyer?
Yeah, great to be with you guys. So I was born in Cuba. I came here when I was 10, went to a public school in South Florida. So I went to elementary school and then 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, and then high school, all at a different place.
Oh,
because
really?
that was the era of integration, busing, and all of that. So that was a different experience growing up here in Miami. But as I said, I went to Miami Senior High School here. Then I went to the University of Florida undergrad.
Go Gators.
There you go. And I was an economics major there. And afterwards, I wanted to come back to Miami. So I went to the University of Miami School of Law and graduated from the University of Miami School of Law. Honestly, when I went to UM Law, I had no idea what being a lawyer meant other than you went to trial. That's the only thing I understood when they started saying things like, you want to be a transactional lawyer? I had no idea what that meant.
Right. Did you know, did you go to college thinking I want to go to law school? How'd you end up at law school?
Not really. I wanted to be a journalist for reasons that I sometimes have a hard time explaining to myself. I gravitated towards economics.
Right.
It's something I just wanted to learn something about. And then as I was thinking about what to do, I loved to write. I thought I was a good public speaker. Maybe I was deluding myself. But then I decided, well, that's what lawyers do. So I went to law school. Showed up the first day of class and my classmates were all there talking about law firms and their future. And I had no idea what a law firm was or anything like that. But
so we can date ourselves. Who were your first economics professors at UF?
David Denslow, obviously.
Denslow. Yeah.
The guy's a legend.
The guy is a legend.
That was micro. And then macro, what was his name? He had a really long hair. He was a bit more eccentric than David Denslow. He was like the polar opposite of David Denslow.
Yeah,
he was the macro guy, and I can't remember his name.
Yeah,
I remember Denslow had a thing where on the first day, and I don't think you could do this anymore, he would ask people in the front row their social security numbers. And at the end of the class, he could recite them all back. I don't think anyone would say their social security number anymore.
No, it would get recorded.
Right, recorded.
But he would remember all kinds of economic statistics, and he would sit there in class and just, you remember that? And he would just blurt them out. He was a legend.
That was one of those things I tried to forget, I think. So you were talking about arriving at law school and you felt like perhaps other people were a bit more prepared for the profession than you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just sort of signed up and here you are.
Yeah. I graduated. I worked for a law firm for about half a year. And then I went and started at Holland & Knight.
You were somewhere before Holland & Knight?
Yeah. I had clerked somewhere and I had stayed there. And then I went to Holland & Knight for about, 11 years, 12 years, something like that. And then with 2 or 3 of partners at Holland & Knight, we went and sort of
launched,
founded the Miami office of Hunton. Back then, Hunton and Williams, which was back then a exclusively Virginia-centered office. Their headquarters were in Richmond and have stayed there ever since. I think it's like 23 years.
Right, and 5 Miami guys opened up in the Miami office. What year? That was 2000?
That was 1999.
Oh, 99.
It was like March of 1999.
Now, we could talk about the current state of things for here in Miami. You could just jump right to that and kind of move around a lot. You kind of did it back in the day, years ago, when there weren't as many international or global firms coming here. A lot of people, it was like a stepping stone to South America. At least they thought so.
Exactly, yeah.
And so what are you seeing today? I mean, we're seeing all of these global firms decide that they're going to come and open up and really seems like open up a Miami office and not just as a stepping stone for Latin America.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, I think in the last, really as long as 10 years ago, you started seeing that, right? That trend of international firms opening in Miami, getting lateral partners from all the big firms and sort of launching their offices here. I think it's a great thing for Miami in the sense for the profession in one way, because I think it tells the legal profession and sort of the client world that, hey, this is a destination place. Like you said, it's not just a jumping off point for Latin America. I think that was a mistake that a lot of firms used to make.
Or just a satellite.
In the 90s, late 90s. I remember at that time, Miami led the nation in failed satellite offices.
Exactly.
Because everyone thought it was going to be open in Miami office and all of a sudden Latin America will just come.
So I was telling a law student this weekend that I was, sort of talking about the legal market. And I said, people go to Miami thinking I'm going to do international law. And what does that even mean? And for a lot of people, it's what it ends up being is you represent foreign clients, right? It's not international law. But I think there was that sense that sort of Miami was this gateway to Latin America and all of that, which may be true to some extent, but it's not, I don't think, and I don't know your experience, I don't think it's a way to build a law firm. Unless you don't have a lot of expectations.
No, it doesn't seem that way, right? And certainly not for us, but it doesn't seem that way. It's more, to me, that is more of just satellite offices. It's a jumping off point for South America rather than servicing clients that are here based in Miami or based in Florida.
That's exactly right. And I know that when we opened the Hunton office in Miami, I know for my partners, for me, that was a real issue that we had. We wanted to make sure that it was not a satellite office.
Right.
That's not the concept or the sense that they had. And that it wasn't just that also, we're going to now have some entree into Latin America. We were pretty convinced of that. But I think that was part of why I think we have been successful in the market, that we had staying power, is because we never saw it that way.
Right.
And the firm leadership never saw it that way. So I think that's important.
I also think that the fact that Hunton is a Virginia-based firm had something to do with the receptiveness to another office not being just a stepchild. A lot of the big firms are New York-centric. And with all respect to my New York brethren, a lot of New York firms think that they're the center of the world and everything else is just a second tier. And I don't think Hunton had that approach.
I think that's exactly right. I think that was a big part of it. When we joined the firm, they had a culture that I think was receptive to lawyers that were new. And I think they had more of a team, department-centric approach. And I think that helped. And I think we started small. I mean, we started with 4 lawyers, then a 5th joined us, and then we kind of grew from there.
So was it 4 and then 5?
Yeah, exactly. But having said that, we just always had the mentality that we didn't want to grow for growth's sake, that you wanted to surround yourself with quality lawyers. And I think the success of firms that are coming in now, and we'll see that maybe in 10 years, we'll be able to judge whether I'm right or wrong. So keep the tape. But I think that the success of that it's a recruiting issue to me. It's, do you attract people who are really, really quality lawyers, not just names in the legal community, but really have a lot to contribute and are willing to build a practice as part of a law firm. And I think we were always mindful of that, as opposed to just, hey, let's bring in a lot of lateral partners and then let's see what shakes out in 3 or 4 years.
Well, it's almost like building a law firm, but you're just an office within sort of a global empire, if you will.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think part of the success of like Hunton merged about the pandemic throws time off, but just I think 2019, 2018, we merged with the Andrews Kurth firm in Houston. And I think part of the reason why that merger has been successful, and I think it really has, is because we just didn't look at it as, hey, let's merge 2 firms and see what shakes out. But we had a very thoughtful approach to, we need to merge lawyers who have sort of the same cultural view, the same values. I mean, and people talk about that a lot. That's almost a mantra, but you see it in practice. And that's what leads to, I think, lasting relationships. That actually means that you're going to have some staying power.
What was a bit stunning to me was hearing some of the footprint that they're laying down, at least the leases they're signing. 60,000 square feet, 50,000 square feet. I mean, that's a lot of space.
The firms that are opening offices?
Yeah, what you were saying, Juan, was, when you guys came down here, or Hunton came down here initially, it was small. 4 lawyers, and we're going to grow as we need to. We have these firms coming down, signing these massive leases and saying, all right, now we're going to fill that space.
That's a scary economic proposition,
scary, right?
Because and then that puts pressure on the lawyers that you've attracted laterally to do that. I'm not saying, I'm sure some will be very successful, but I'm sure some will not because of that.
Right. Because I think clock, literally. Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And you've already seen it with some firms that have been here. And so I think the issue now is not so much a satellite concept as it is that. Have you made the right economic bet? In terms of,
it's
your
almost
ambitions.
Like they want to show that they're putting down roots by signing these massive leases, instead of the concept of, well, you're just sort of dipping your toe in. And so I'm not going to join you. I'm going to go to another firm that is more entrenched.
And I think what you said, actually, putting down roots is the key. Because I think opening an office is not the same as putting down roots. Opening an office, you can open an office and have a couple lawyers here, sign a big lease and make a splash. But if they're not involved in the community and representing clients here and in courts here and in cases here, and they don't put down roots in the community, then they may not succeed. Because we have satellite offices here for law firms that none of us see. They're not in cases here. They're not involved in the community. They just have an office here.
That's exactly right. I also think we were, some of my partners may not like me saying this, but we were from the beginning a very litigation-centered firm. I think, Jeff, you experienced that. For a while, we were a very litigation-centered firm. And then we attracted really top-notch corporate lawyers. So, it doesn't mean that we don't have that transactional side with great lawyers, but there's something about litigation that entrenches you in the local legal market because you go to court, judges know you, you're seen, and we had some really successful litigators. I think that helped us.
Do we think there's enough industry to support all this and the rate pressure? You have firms coming from New York and partners at $1,500, $1,800 an hour. associates at $900 an hour now.
That I think is the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
So you have to attract lawyers who can meet that market, who can command those kinds of rates in a very competitive market. I practice in the employment law field, right? And we have great lawyers in firms that are not charging those rates. So you always feel that competitive pressure in my specific practice area. That's not true of all practice areas, but I see that. And the only way you can deal with that and the only way you can compete in that marketplace is to have very good quality lawyers, high quality lawyers, attract cases that you have to differentiate yourself. Why are you worth that? And I think that is a big challenge in this market where there is, as great as this market is, there is a limit.
So when did you become managing partner of the office?
I was about 2010, 2011, somewhere in that time frame.
So it's been
about 10 years, 11 years, something like that.
Before that you practiced, I'm not trying to date you, but before that you practiced for many years. How was that transition from just being a partner to being the managing partner?
In my case, it wasn't that difficult. I think for a couple of reasons. I think we have a very good support staff. That's critical. I think you both have practiced enough that you know how important that is to the life of a firm. So that's one. And the other is, I think just the experience of having helped open the office, whatever my role was in that, but you're in the ground floor. It's very different when you come laterally into a big firm or you've grown in the big firm concept or environment in a big office and you sort of go through the ranks. But when you are four of you in a room trying to decide what's the right lease, what's the right amount of space that we want, and you have to project growth and you're doing that, then I think that sort of trains you for that role. But there is a management aspect of it that is economic, as you guys know so very well, in terms of managing your budgets and your expectations and all of that. And then there's what I would just sort of call the cultural aspect of it, right? You want to build the right culture or maintain the right culture. The people who came before me built a really good culture in our office and in our firm, and it was a challenge to maintain that. But a lot of that is keeping people who are good people, not just lawyers, but support staff, and making sure your office is not just some conveyor belt, including support staff. And I think that helps you build a culture, and I think that helps. But to me, I think what eased my transition into that was just the fact that I had been there when we were building the office, and I knew the people that we had, and I wasn't just coming in cold into that situation.
And I think it's probably become Brett's comment about all the other firms coming in and the pricing has made it more challenging to keep good people because they're getting calls and they're getting solicited and there's a lot of opportunities out there. And so if they're not happy, they're going to start taking those calls.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think recruiting and maintaining good talent is the biggest challenge that I think we have in this market. I think it's probably true in any market.
More so now, yeah.
Yeah, more so now. I mean, lawyers, one of the things about managing, as you guys know so well, one of the things about managing a law firm is you're there, you're managing, but it's what your partners and your associates are doing that's really going to drive the success. You better have surrounded yourself with really good lawyers, because if you don't, then you could be the best manager in the world. You're not going to be successful in a bigger firm. In any firm, of course.
Right?
No, but if you're a very, very small shop and you're dependent on one person, one partner to bring in all the work, then that's one thing. You're small shop. But I think as you grow, then you really are dependent on the quality of lawyers that you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And like you said, the support staff as well, quality of the support staff is super important. Maybe even more so.
No, it certainly is to the culture of the firm. The pandemic has shown that a lot, I think, in terms of the culture that you build. Not say you know me individually, but that we collectively have built in the firm and in the office. Because I think when you see how people reacted to the challenges, I mean, we moved from 3 floors in another building in Brickell to downtown Miami in the middle of the pandemic because we had already signed the lease. And just see how people pitched in and sort of the pride that they took in making sure that the new office was nice. That tells you a lot about the quality of people you surround yourself with. People went the extra step, the extra mile, if you will, during those times. It just tells you a lot about people care for the institution, not just for the office. So that is important. I mean, if you go back today, we have, whether it's office services, whether it's some of our secretarial, professional assistant staff, paralegal staff, we have people who were there from the early 2000s. They've grown with the place. And that doesn't mean you don't have turnover and change. That's important. But sort of that loyalty factor is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key to the culture. These things play off each other. Culture is maintained by keeping some semblance of your team together in place, but you keep some semblance of your team in place because there's a culture that they all feel a part of.
That's exactly right. And that's a good way to measure whether you are building the right culture. And part of that, by the way, talk about retention of talent. This is more of my personal philosophy has always been, I say this to associates who leave the office because they want to go to something else, because they see better growth opportunities somewhere else, or they go in-house. To me, part of it is making sure that as people transition out of your office, they want to leave. They leave on good terms. They leave because you accept the fact that, hey, you don't know what somebody's chosen path to success is or what their family situation is. And people see that, I think, the way people are treated on the way out. And that also, I think, affirms your culture.
Yeah, I've read surveys said dozens of times that there's two ways to leave a big firm. One is an email that says Jeff Bast is no longer with the firm. And the other is there's a going away party in the kitchen at 4:00 today. I wanted to leave with a party, so I succeeded. But no, I think that's a testament to the firm too. I also think it depends how you leave, where you leave. If you're going to a competitor, you're stealing clients. Or
of course.
There's not going to be a going away party. Yeah. What have you guys done, or how have you handled the culture maintenance in this weird transition period that we're in now, where we're not only being flooded with the firms opening offices, but also we have this hybrid, if you will, work environment where some people are back in the office and others aren't. Are you struggling with that?
I don't know. We'll talk in 2 years because I think that is a retention and a recruiting issue to a large extent. I think we've done well in that. I'm very confident that we have, but it's a challenge. And it's a challenge. You may remember when we started the shutdown and everybody was off, and then everybody was trying to do a weekly Zoom meeting, and it's like, I can't take one of those. I can't take one of those anymore. I think it's a matter of communication, not just making sure that the partners are always communicating with the associates they work with, making sure that there's that sort of flow, that you understand what people's needs are. Tell somebody the other day that there are people in my office I haven't seen in 2.5 years, since March of 2020. But you know what? They have their own personal situation that you take into account, and they're doing really well in terms of being productive and being helpful. I'm talking about both staff and lawyers. And I think once you account for that and you realize that communication is the critical thing, there are not many of those. But I always only have joking when I say come back in 2 years, because I think we're all trying to understand how this is going to evolve.
Sort of organically. Impact is really just unknown, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I feel for the young lawyers, because if they're not in the office, to me, that's how, and we've talked about it a lot, that's how you learn as a young lawyer, being around, interacting, just hearing things. And if you're not in the office and you're sitting in your house by yourself, yes, you're going to learn by drafting and research and all that. But how much can you learn? How much can you feel from a Zoom call?
100%. One thing I've noticed, and this is one, maybe you cannot draw conclusions from this, but I see in our office that some of our first and second year lawyers are in a lot more than some of our midterm associates, with a lot of exceptions. But it's interesting to me because there's a level of associate who probably feels like I've already developed relationships, so I am freer, if you will, to work remotely a lot more, where the younger associates say, no, that's not the case. I mean, I think they just almost like organically that happens. Having said that, I talk a lot, I actually do, because we have these mentoring sessions that I'm a part of for, minority students across the state of Florida and stuff like that. So we talk a lot about, we have mentoring sessions, and that's a great thing. And it's great to have mentors in the profession. You need that. But I also talk to young lawyers a lot about having role models, which I define not as, somebody you look up to, but somebody you learn from almost by osmosis. Not necessarily somebody who's mentoring you, not necessarily somebody who is taking the time to give you advice or whatever, but somebody that you happen to see take a deposition, whether it's your opposing counsel, but most of the time is someone you work with and you see them work, right? And that person may never give you the time of day in terms of mentoring, but they happen to be really good lawyers, and you see them work and you learn that way. I don't think there's anyone who is very successful who did not in some way had some kind of mimetic sort of copycat. Right. You learn by watching other people. You get better by watching other people.
Sure. That's an excellent point. And I think it's not even just how you work. In other words, not only how you interact with opposing counsel, but also how you interact with the paralegal and with staff, and pleases and thank yous, and how you just treat people with respect. It's almost like parenting. Your kids learn from watching you.
No, that's such a great point. That is such a great point. That is something that you talk about developing a culture. You do it not by talking about culture, but by being in a certain way, right? And you don't know if that's happening until you've seen it develop and you're in it. Exactly right. It's not, everybody talks about culture, but do you have it? you have it if you do it, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And if you live it, it's sort of, I use the word organically, if it's just natural to you, if it happens. And if it does, other people see it. And lawyers who may not have that aptitude coming in, but they see that almost like, wow, to fit into this place, I have to be that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you create culture and maintain a culture.
Yeah. And I think we underestimate, you're not going to take a first year aside and say, okay, say please and thank you to the paralegal, or talk to them with respect, or report to them what happened at the meeting. But they'll see you do that. Although we have had a few people come through here over the years where we had to sit them down and say, you say please and thank you when you're asking someone to help you do something. I just think that's some of these things, they seem so obvious.
But that's why I say that you have to wait a couple of years, 3 years to see the real impact of what we've gone through the last 2 or 3 years and are going through now. Because it is those little things that make a difference, and you don't know how that's going to play out. I would tell you that on an individual basis, I would encourage all the young lawyers to go into the office as much as possible. Interact, because again, a lot of your learning is by seeing. Sort of, that's what I meant by modeling.
Right. So this is even like, we don't even know the thought process of young lawyers, right? And what they've seen and gone through. Because when we came up, we had busy offices, right?
Exactly.
Everyone was in, everyone's running around until 2020. Like this whole concept of remote working and not seeing each other was just foreign. But we had a young lawyer who started here. He was at a prior firm, and he started on a week when either people were on vacation or some people were ill, and the office was kind of empty. And I said to him, hey, it's not usually this empty. It's just this week happened, whatever. And he said, oh, this isn't empty to me. Wow. Remember, I started during COVID. My legal career during COVID, when it was either the office was completely empty or I was at home. I didn't even think about that. I was thinking, oh man, he must be thinking, wow, this place is gutted. There's nobody here. What's going on? And he was like, yeah, it's fine.
So that's fascinating. That's fascinating. I also think it's incumbent on partners, it's incumbent on leaders to reach out to young lawyers who are not in the office, who work remote a lot, and make sure that there is that connection that goes on. And there are ways that you could do that, but you have to be purposeful about it. It's a recruiting issue these days. I mean, you have to have the flexibility if you're going to recruit talent. So you have to be flexible. So then you also have to be very purposeful and mindful about how do you give that experience, just to be fair to the young lawyer, number one, but also to help that person be integrated into what you want to build.
I also think if you're a young lawyer and you're coming to an office and it's a whole floor and there's 7 people on a whole floor, and it's got to be boring too. We need human interaction and socialization. And if you're bored, you're not going to be happy. And if you're not happy, you're going to be looking for something else. And that's counter to building something.
Having said that, I do think people can be successful working remotely, but it takes a little bit of, again, being purposeful on their part also about looking for opportunities to learn, to get feedback. And again, to learn by watching, which is so critical.
And I think it also depends, and we've talked about this, and you referred to it, is where are they in their career?
Exactly.
Right? A more senior person who's got clients and business and they know what they're doing, for them, they can work remotely. They've already had their connection in their career. They should want to connect and train young people, to mentor, be a role model. Right. But for themselves, they don't really need to be.
That's exactly right. Except that at some point, it's what you want out of your career. Because if you really want to progress in a law firm, then at some point you have to be a mentor, you have to be a leader, and you also have to be a business developer at some point, and all of that happens through human interaction.
Yeah, you got to build the next class. You need future leaders, otherwise you're always going to be the leader.
Exactly right.
Juan?
Wait. We got to talk about Gator football. For a few minutes, right, before we leave.
Please.
I didn't know if you were going to end it or not. Let's talk about Gator football this year. Coach Napier in. How do we feel in the room?
I don't know about this year, but I think it's incredible. You talk about leadership. I think if you watch what he's doing, sort of building a foundation. And again, there's that overused word, culture. But it's an overused word, absolutely. There's no one that's not building a culture, right? But if you watch him work, and if you've seen, I mean, it's almost an example of somebody who is very methodical, very deliberate, has a plan, and is not caught up in the immediacy of, I think he has
and what's next, right? He's not thinking, where am I going next?
Exactly. Right. No, exactly. I don't know about this year. I'm not very optimistic.
We may see some bright spots, and who knows, maybe we'll be surprised.
I'm really excited about the foundation he's building, and how he's doing it.
Well, we have
2 to 3 years.
Got a good quarterback.
I think so, that's right. That we do.
And, we have some good position players.
We do. It's all about depth, man. It's all about depth.
I know that. I think we're struggling with the depth, maybe, but we'll see.
We'll see. I'm excited. It's one of those years that I'm really excited because you don't know what to expect. But it's also not the pressure of,
Right.
Oh, right. This is the year.
This is the year with
You're supposed to lose, right?
Yeah.
I agree.
It's Danny Warfel's senior year, Tim Tebow's, and boy, he's only got one more year to go. Yep. We got to win this year.
Yeah. I agree.
All right. Go Gators. Juan, I really enjoyed this. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. That's been really a lot.
If you're listening and you like this episode, please give us a 5-star review. Share the podcast with your friends and family. And come visit us soon.
Thank you, Nelson. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you.
For more information on this show and other resources, visit fastamron.com and connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram @FastAmron.